I'm speaking with composer James S. Levine, who has been behind some of the biggest shows on television, including American Horror Story, Rizzoli Isles, Glee, Nip Tuck, The Closer, and many, many more. He has composed fantastic scores to films such as Running with Scissors, and as well as co-writing The Weatherman with Hans Zimmer back in the day with Gore Verbinski. Jimmy, thanks so much for speaking today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So to start off, I would love to know how you got started in music. Kind of what was the initial interest to you, and at what point did you decide to focus on the path for film and TV scoring?
Well, I started out playing piano when I was a little kid. I kind of asked for piano lessons and finally got them by the time I was 9, and then it just sort of was something that I really fell in love with and was very passionate about very early on. At that time, I sort of played what accompanied my sister, who was a singer, and choirs and do musicals, and then I started writing music at the same time, writing songs, and I started thinking about music for picture probably around the time I was in college, and then pursued some people I knew who were working I grew up in Boston, and I pursued some friends of mine who were doing advertising work, and I did some commercials, and I loved it, and then I came out here and just sort of on a fact-finding mission when I was like 20 and met some people that were doing this and was like, that's what I got to do. That's kind of it. Yeah.
What kind of music were you listening to growing up, or composers or musicians or genres? What were really kind of like, I guess, appealing to you and their style?
I mean, I had a really eclectic background. I did a lot of musicals, like traditional musicals, and then more modern musicals, sort of old, like, Guys and Dolls and that kind of stuff. And then all the way up to sort of more contemporary, like, Stephen Schwartz, Andrew Lloyd Webber, and, that kind of stuff. So I was doing that, and then I had a hip-hop band in college. I was playing in a Southern Baptist black church, which was a huge part of my development as a musician. I played on a cruise ship that played cover tunes going around Boston Harbor when I was in college. Sort of like everything and anything. I'm just a big fan of music. If it feels good, it is good. That's sort of always been my philosophy, even when I write. So... Yeah.
And you did early in your career when you came out here, you started working at Remote Control with Hans, and I know a lot of composers I've spoke with, went that route. Would you say that writing additional music for a composer and learning the process that way, would you say that's a great great way to learn the business and a great starting point, or was it more just kind of more about learning how the business works versus more of the artistic aesthetic side of it?
Oh, I think it was all of the above, really. I mean, I think it's sort of like an invaluable opportunity, and the only way, I mean, it worked for me. I'm not sure that, there's no one way to make, to have success in this industry, but for me, it was sort of everything. It was, aesthetic, story, what to say, what not to say, where to take chances, where to just, sort of play it safe, all those things. Sitting in the room with Hans and other great composers like Harry Gregson Williams, Jeff Rona, John Powell. I mean, we just kind of, it was like an apprenticeship, from heaven, because you really got an opportunity to see how things were happening on so many different levels. And I feel really fortunate, and was fortunate enough to, be invited into situations, when I was very young, and just, to be a fly on the wall in certain meetings and to pay attention and to be asked to contribute either my piano playing or some writing or arranging or producing or recording. It was like, it was great. You had to be ready for anything, and it was super exciting. And, we took it very, very, very seriously. I know all the guys that have been through here do and did.
Right.
It really prepared us,
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. It sounds like it was focused on collaboration too, which I think is important.
Well, completely, because, it's funny, we have to collaborate, with what we do. It's sort of the key to everything. Even though we sit in a room with no windows most of the time, and have very little contact while we're writing, it's just ultimately, usually your characters on screen are collaborating in the story they're in with the people on the set, with the director, with the producer. We're just part of a big, team of people that's trying to create a singular product.
Right. And speaking of collaboration, you've composed many scores to some of the most watched TV shows, and notably working on 3 Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk shows, Nip Tuck, Glee, and American Horror Story. So what's the working relationship between you, Ryan, and Brad over the years? I mean, how did it start? How has it evolved between you guys?
Well, I mean, I met Ryan, PJ Bloom, who's a music supervisor, actually was working with Ryan on Nip Tuck, and then they were looking for somebody to score the show, and PJ remembered something I wrote. Ryan heard it. He responded favorably, and then I met with them, and, you know, it was, thank God, you know, they took a chance on someone that didn't have any credits. And so we did that together. It was obviously successful. And then, you know, as other projects came up, you know, whether they were right or wrong, it just depended. You know, I would sort of, you know, Ryan was gracious enough to give me opportunities to work on some of the other shows with him. And then, you know, he's got a pretty strong voice that's, you know, very inspiring and very inspired. So it was super fun, super positive experience.
And does the composer slash showrunner, does that relationship, I mean, I've heard other composers equate it to kind of the director, like on a movie set, director-composer relationship, but does that level of interaction or relationship change between, say, the start of the series, like during the pilot and the initial season, versus kind of many seasons down the line? Does that kind of relationship evolve or change at all?
Well, of course. I mean, I think, you know, you start out and it's like, you know, it's like going on the first date and having a cup of coffee, and then, you know, 3 years in, you know, you're either killing each other or loving each other even more and having children. So I think like it evolves in you know, hopefully in a very organic way, where you develop a shorthand, you develop a trust, you develop like a sort of a mutual respect and understanding, and you know, your aesthetic deepens, as does your personal and professional relationship.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, one of the shows you guys worked on was Glee, and it's a show known for its musical performances, and it's really cool. You talked about working or having an inspiration from musicals. I mean, what was the role of your music in a show, and was it a challenge to find place for score in a show where singing was kind of the main draw?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It kind of you know, it evolved sort of organically, yet at the same time it was a little bit of a challenge at the beginning to figure out tonally what the score was going to be. We tried a lot of different ideas, you know, while they're editing the pilot, and I got to work on the pilot really very closely with them when they were shooting it. But we tried a lot of different things, and ultimately it wound up sort of being a score that you could create inside the walls of a high school. That's sort of where it wound up. We tried, you know, I tried like bigger, broader, orchestral, you know, more electronic, more this, more that. But ultimately it was like what felt the most honest was creating a score that felt, you know, emotional, in the sense that, you know, it was like the emotional beats are just all solo piano. And I just imagined myself sitting in a high school, you know, choir room like I did when I was a kid, you know, just by myself, or out on the stage before the rehearsal started, playing, you know, some piano. And that's kind of, it wound up working against picture, you know. And then for the more, you know, for the sort of the kids and the fun stuff, it was like, oh, let's do a cappella group with, you know, and so we tried that, and it was like, boom, worked. And then for Sue Sylvester, who's sort of like the, you know, the, I don't know, what would you call her? Like well, she's the gym teacher, but we, you know, that this like high school marching band, you know, a la pep rally, kind of like drum percussion corps. We threw that up against her, and it was just, everybody's like rolling on the floor. So we just knew we hit it. And it's a very honest score in that way, because it's so, you know, it's so tied into that time in your life, and that time in my life, certainly.
Right.
And that's what it felt like when we were shooting the pilot. We were like, really? This feels like we're back in high school. Because we were in these high school theaters, you know, high school auditoriums filming. It was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then a completely different animal is American Horror Story, which, you know, it started this anthology style of television, which has taken off, and everything is kind of in this vein now. Fargo and True Detective, and so, I mean, you started the series. I think Matt Quayle, he did the last season Freak Show. But what was it like scoring for an anthology series where you knew that each season was one storyline? Did you just treat it as kind of a 3-act arc over the episodes, or did you take it kind of one episode at a time? Did you know the whole season out before?
Thematically, we knew what the seasons were going to be doing for the most part. But yeah, we took it. It was sort of like Ryan had a pretty strong idea of what he was, what he imagined the tone to be of the season, musically and aesthetically in other areas as well. So working from that, it was like doing a new show or a new movie every season. You sort of, we develop strong themes and we know the characters are coming and work on those. And Ryan likes thematic writing. So we would work on those very strongly at the beginning of the season, and they would evolve. Those themes would then evolve. But every year was a totally different year. Like it was as if you were just starting out all over again. So same struggle, same victories and same defeats, all of those. Yeah.
So would you treat? I mean, you did Murder House, Asylum, and Coven. So would you say they're completely independent scores, or are they connected at all in any form whatsoever?
I think of them completely independently. I mean, I really do. Like the aesthetic and the approach and the characters, the story, everything was totally different each year. I think Murder House is a great score. It's modern. It's it's creative in the sense that I hadn't done any horror before that point, and that was that was great. It was really fun and really exciting for me. Asylum was just like as dark and disturbed as I could possibly go, but yet it was sort of a period thing, so it was fun. That was a trip. And then, Coven was obviously hugely successful, and that just was like a modern, edgy synth pop horror score. It was awesome. Super fun. And all very different, and fun to do, because you get to reach out in different areas.
Oh no, that's great. I mean, it's so awesome that it's such a great concept too. I mean, not just for the music, but for the actors and the costume design and the production design. I mean, I think it's a really awesome.
Oh yeah. Super great opportunities. Yeah, great opportunity to invent yourself again. Yeah.
And one of the most iconic parts of the show, of course, is the theme, which was composed by Charlie Clouser. And I always found that interesting that on some shows a different composer does the title theme, and that like Rolf Kent on Dexter or Danny Elfman on The Simpsons. Is there a reason for that? And as a composer working on the body of the show, do you embrace that theme or kind of ignore it?
You embrace it in so far as it's identifiable with the show.
Right.
It just depends on different. It depends. Like different shows, it just depends how you're involved at a certain point. Like, I don't think that theme was done before I was going to do American Horror Story.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, so it started in season 1, and they adjusted a little bit each year, but for me, I was sort of, I wasn't certain that I was going to be working on the show. Mm-hmm. So I think it had been done by that point. And then at that point, people loved it, and that was it,
Okay.
And then other shows, you come in on, and it's the same situation, or, for whatever reason, someone else is going to do the theme, and sometimes they've done the theme and they don't like it, so 3 episodes in you change the theme. I mean, that's like one of those things where it really just depends. There's so many variables. The theme is a big deal, but in the case of American Horror, they had been working on the main theme and main titles, for promotional stuff, like way before we started. They may have had it done before they even shot the episode. I mean, it was so early. But what a great theme, though, huh?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, it sets the tone. It's one of those great TV themes. You hear it. It's time for American Horror Story.
Totally.
So, looking at kind of your body of work, and you've done network television shows and you've done cable shows, and does the different they're both episodic television, but network sometimes has longer seasons and everything, and probably different scheduling. Does it make a difference at all in your approach, whether it's a shorter 10-episode, 13-episode season versus a 20-episode season?
Not really. I mean, every show is a show by show basis, and every episode is episode by episode in a way. So it really is dependent on the story, Like sometimes if there's a story that, like Damages, for instance, well, that's a evolution. That's like 13 episodes and you don't know where you're going to go. And so it's important to keep that in mind. But if you're doing, something that's, and even with Glee too, we have story arcs that carry throughout the season. So we have themes that carry across, multiple episodes. But then at certain other shows, maybe week to week, it really just depends,
Yeah. And so what would you say is the most challenging aspect of writing scores for television?
Time.
Time. That's always the answer?
Or lack thereof. That's probably a universal answer. Yeah. I mean, I think it's time and learning, and sometimes, when you start a new show, learning the language of the people you're working with, because everybody's got a different, everybody's, word for loud is slightly different, or the way they hear loud, or they hear soft, or they hear pretty, or they hear sad is slightly different. So I think it's learning how to communicate with the people you're working with in a way that everybody feels comfortable and is getting sort of getting to a place where they feel the material is totally working.
Absolutely. And so how would you compare TV scoring to film scoring?
I think that, I mean, it's different. Obviously, you have, you have a little bit more time in film, not always, but most of the time. You have the story is sort of a finite thing typically, so thematically, you can really dial in a little bit tighter, but not necessarily. And what else? And I think you just have way more time to record music to put in live musicians. It's very difficult. I think the biggest challenge is time.
Yeah, you guys,
and more too with technology. It's we get crunched so hard now.
I know they expect it to be done, I think, now in such a short amount of time, which is kind of hurts you guys even more. It's like, well, you guys have the technology, just churn it out,
Yeah, it's like nobody quite understands what it takes to do it, so then you do it really fast 1 week, and they're like, oh, well, you can do it that way. And
right.
It's like, oh, shoot. You backed yourself into this, this corner of sleepless nights,
So looking forward, what projects can we expect coming up?
It's a busy summer. I'm doing The Last Ship on TNT with Jim Dooley. We're doing that together, so that's on. We're sort of halfway through the season right now, which is exciting. Working on Major Crimes, Rizzoli Isles, and the last season of Royal Pains as well.
Wow. busy schedule.
Busy times,
so are you coming back for American Horror Story Hotel, or is Mac taking the reins for that?
I haven't heard. I have a feeling Mac is probably going to do it, but I don't know exactly. I know Ryan's got a lot of different things going on, so
okay, cool.
See how everything shakes out.
And to wrap up, I always like to ask composers this one question: if you could score any film ever made, pretending the original score never existed, what film?
Oh God!
What film would you choose?
Oh man, that's tough because I can't think of the movies without the scores in them.
Yeah, I know. You got to pretend. What kind of playground would you like to play in?
I think right now in this moment, I think it would change because I'm a bit schizophrenic as a listener and as someone
right.
watching movies. I don't know. I think right now I'd love to do a Michael Clayton kind of movie, but then at the same time I'd like to do a fantasy action adventure movie, Jurassic Park or something like that. It may be fun too. So it really just depends.
Just whatever the mood is, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jimmy, it was such a blast chatting with you. I've actually been listening to your music, since you started, so it was a real pleasure and an honor. And
thank you.
Thanks so much for your time.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much.